Are you envious? Because I am generous. The gospel readings for the last couple Sundays have been digging deep into our emotions, and this week is no different. 2 weeks ago at the regional ministry, we talked about the process of being reconciled and how a person making a complaint could actually be expressing a desire to restore a relationship. And that challenged us to ask, am I loving enough to complain when I am hurt? Last Sunday, the gospel reading was a parable about anger. In the regional ministry, we had focused on the psalm, but you did hear the gospel text, which was Matthew 18, verses 21 to 35, in which a slave is forgiven for 10,000 talents, but instead of being grateful, he goes to another slave who owes him just 100 denarii, and he seized him by the throat, demanding to be repaid. For me, that graphic moment of seizing a man by the throat exposes not just anger, but all the emotions behind that anger. Shame, embarrassment, and self-loathing. He wasn't just choking the man, he was trying to kill the part of himself that he saw in his fellow slave. As Thich Nhat Hanh writes, often when you have a difficulty with a particular person, he may have a characteristic that reflects a weakness of your own, which is difficult to accept. I'll use myself as an example. I get angry at people who do nothing but talk about themselves. It's fair, you'd say, to be annoyed by that, but I get really angry. Why? Well, if I'm honest, it's because they're just talking about themselves, then they can't talk about me. I'm guilty of the same thing. This challenges us all to ask ourselves the next time that we're angry, where we're seizing by the throat sort of angry, what is it within us that sparks that anger? Now, today, we have a parable about envy, which is actually also related to anger. Oh dear. I don't know if I have enough energy to do all this self-inspection. Jesus keeps prompting us to get deeper and deeper within ourselves. Calvin in his Institute says, nearly all wisdom we possess, that is to say, true and sound wisdom, consists of two parts, the knowledge of God and of ourselves. As you know God, you will know yourself better. As you know yourself, you will know God. These things are linked. Many saints and mystics like Teresa of Avila have said similar things. Our spiritual journeys, if we are faithful to the path, take us deeper and deeper into self-awareness, as uncomfortable as that might be. So enough stalling. Today we are going to tackle envy. First, the difference between jealousy and envy. I don't really think there is any. I know officially there's a difference. People like Brene Brown make a point of it. Envy is about wanting something that someone else has, and jealousy is fear of losing what you have to someone else. But colloquially, we use those terms interchangeably because both envy and jealousy touch the same place in our heart. So don't worry about making a distinction. To help us get at that emotion, Jesus tells us a parable. It's about people being hired to work the field. They're hired at different times. Some worked 9 hours, some worked 1 hour, but at the end of the day, the boss pays them all the same amount. That doesn't seem fair, does it? They shouldn't all get the same amount. And the workers who worked all day, well, they complain about it. The boss challenges them. Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? Are you envious because I am generous? Yeah, I feel it too, don't you? It feels like an issue of justice and fairness. This story, it just upsets me. And the moment I get upset, well, that's the moment to stop and ask, why? If I was there, would I be envious of the money? Do I wish I got more? Well, sure, that would have been a nice surprise, but I did agree to the amount I got. The amount itself was fair. What upsets me is that someone else got the same amount without doing the same amount of work. I am resentful of them for starting at 4 p.m. I wish I could have done the same. Talking about her own feelings of resentment, Brene Brown says that
I called my therapist like on the way home. I said, I really need to talk to you. And as we started to unpack that, what I realized is the times when I was the most resentful is when I'm deep into burnout, I'm exhausted, and I don't think everyone else is working as hard as I am. And it turns out that I'm not mad because people aren't working as hard. I'm envious because they're taking care of themselves.
when we're feeling anger, resentment, when we're upset with someone, sometimes the root of that anger is shame, and sometimes it's envy. I have witnessed a lot of ugly anger that arises out of envy. This week when driving to the office at Westmount, my car got stopped by protesters. There were people protesting how schools address issues of gender identity, and then there were the counter-protesters to those protests. I had a deep sigh about it. It breaks my heart. It's a different target, but the same opposition that I've seen my whole life. And I've often asked myself, why do people get so angry about queer and trans folk living their lives? How does it affect them? I think it's envy. When you are brightly, colorfully yourself, when you dress the way you want to dress, love who you want to love, be you in ways that don't conform to the rest of society's rules, then you spark the envy of those who wish they could have burst out of those confines, but were too afraid to do so. My wardrobe is all professional dark gray suits, while you get to wear a bedazzled ruby dress. There is envy behind that anger. In Life magazine, 1916, this was published. It says, I am a man, and I should dress like a woman if I were not such a coward. That is, I should revel in velvets, in silks and satins, in plumes and ruffles. It would be great fun. It would be an artistic gratification, but I don't dare. In the days of knighthood, when men were really brave, they outdressed the women. But in these degenerate days, we do not venture our fancies beyond cravats. No man in modern times has dared to dress as he pleased, except Oscar Wilde. We buried him with craven hisses. We men rail at women's fashions, but in our hearts we know ourselves to be the slaves of fashion, of one dull, deadly, monotonous fashion, which we hate, but from which we are too cowardly to free ourselves. Anger rooted in envy. I wonder how much misogyny is actually envy. So what makes you angry? What builds resentment in you? I'm not saying that it's definitely envy. It could be shame. It could be a number of things. It could be that rare instance of righteous anger. Anger, by the way, always feels like it's right. Anger has this protective measure, building up the adrenaline in you so that you can defend yourself against an attack. So in the moment, it's always going to feel justified. But step back, breathe, pray. When you think about it, deeply think about it, you'll likely find your anger attached to other emotions and other insecurities. So what if it is envy that lies underneath? What if, like Brene Brown, you're envious of other people taking time to care for themselves? What if, like that anonymous man from 1916, you're envious of the freedom found in women's fashion? What if, like the laborers, you're envious of the workers who didn't have to work as hard? How do we address that emotion? I think the answer lies in Jesus' question. Are you envious because I am generous? Generosity. That's the key. In the parable, the boss points out the generosity because he was generous to every laborer. Before you get envious of what someone else got, give thanks for the generosity that you were shown. Knowing that the boss is generous, maybe you might make different decisions about what time you go to work tomorrow. Maybe you'll take advantage of the boss. Some are going to for sure, but knowing you, you're not going to do that. But you might take a little more time to sleep or enjoy one more cup of coffee. You'll still put in just as much effort, but this time, however, you'll do it out of gratitude. We are surrounded by God's blessings, giving to us in abundance. There is so much we have to be grateful for because God has been generous with us. So before we start coveting our neighbors, stop and give thanks for what it is we do have. And then turn to your neighbor with equally generous thoughts. The scripture this week invites us on a journey through some complex web of emotions within our hearts. We got to get deep to explore how our feelings of envy and resentment can be deeply rooted in our own insecurities and desires. But in the midst of those challenging emotions, Jesus poses this profound question to us. Are you envious because I am generous? In this question, we find the key to transforming our envy into a force for good. It's not about begrudging what others have, but rather recognizing the boundless generosity of God in our own lives. Before we let envy consume us, pause and give thanks for the blessings that we have received. Remember that God's generosity knows no bounds, and we are surrounded by God's abundant love and grace now. When we approach life with gratitude for what we have, we can shift our perspective and we can extend that generosity of spirit to our neighbors, appreciating the unique blessings that they've been granted. We can celebrate their joys and successes, recognizing that their blessings too flow from that same divine source. With that, we can start to release the grip that envy can have on our hearts and replace it with that spirit of generosity and love. It will help you, it helps our relationships, and most importantly, it deepens our connection with God.